You ever wonder how one quiet moment, one simple gesture made in silence, could completely flip the script on someone who's supposed to be untouchable? What if the most invisible person in the room turned out to be the only one capable of reaching a heart that nobody else could even get close to? Picture this: a small coffee shop in the heart of California, where nobody paid her any attention. A shy young woman did something that seemed totally insignificant. No speeches, no big heroic moment. Just a simple act of kindness, directed at a man who couldn't see. What nobody knew: that man had a direct line to someone you absolutely do not want to mess with. And when the truth came out, everything changed. Because that quiet kindness, it didn't go unnoticed. And the consequences, nobody was ready for what came next. This isn't just another story. This is about power, secrets, and the kind of gesture that changes everything. Real quick before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, it's crucial for stories like this, real human stories that hit different, to keep reaching you. When you subscribe and drop that like, you're not just supporting the channel, you're making sure this kind of content keeps coming. It's a simple move, but it makes all the difference. Alright, now let's get back into it. She'd been working at that coffee shop for months, but hardly anyone knew her name. Spoke softly, avoided eye contact, kept her routine tight and predictable. Showed up early every single day, organized the counter with precision, prepared each coffee with extreme care, and watched the world pass by without ever trying to draw attention to herself. Most customers barely registered her existence. To them, she was just part of the furniture, part of the backdrop. But there was something about her that didn't match the hurried energy of the place. A rare calmness, almost like she existed in a different era. The coffee shop sat on a busy street corner in downtown LA, wedged between a tattoo parlor and a vintage record store. The kind of spot where everyone's always rushing, always on their phone, always somewhere else mentally even when they're physically present. The air smelled like espresso and opportunity, and the constant hum of conversation created this weird urban symphony that most people tuned out. She fit into that rhythm perfectly. Invisible by choice. Then one day this older gentleman started showing up. He always arrived with someone, a younger guy built like he spent serious time at the gym, always wearing dark sunglasses even indoors. But despite the company, the old man insisted on sitting alone at a specific table near the back window. Away from the crowd. Away from the noise. His eyes were always open, but they didn't see anything. The white cane resting against his chair gave away his condition, and his careful, measured movements revealed someone who'd learned to navigate a world he couldn't visually process anymore. While most customers looked away, that awkward thing people do when they don't know how to act around disability, she noticed the small details. The way his hands searched for the cup. The slight discomfort when he tried to pay, fingers fumbling with bills he couldn't distinguish. The heavy silence that surrounded him, like an invisible barrier. Without asking permission, without making announcements, she started helping him. Adjusted his cup within easy reach. Described the layout of the table. Explained each small step with patience that seemed endless. Always with respect. Always without drawing attention. She'd crouch down slightly when she spoke to him, keeping her voice low and steady. Your coffee's at 2 o'clock, about 4 inches from your right hand. It's hot, so be careful. The sugar's right next to it if you need it. He'd nod, and sometimes, just sometimes, a small smile would crack through that weathered face. You don't have to do all this, you know, he said one afternoon, his voice gravelly, like he'd spent years shouting orders. I know, she replied simply. But it's no trouble at all. The thing is, she meant it. There was no performance in her kindness, no hidden agenda. Just pure, unfiltered human decency. What nobody in that coffee shop knew was who this man really was. Or why he was there in the first place. And definitely not who was watching everything from a distance. Across the street, parked in the same spot every single day, a black SUV with tinted windows sat idle. The engine always running. The occupants always alert. They weren't there for the coffee or the atmosphere. They were there for him. The old man's name was Vincent Romano. And if you knew anything about the streets of California, from San Francisco down to San Diego, that name carried weight. Serious weight. The kind that made people choose their words carefully and watch their backs constantly. Vincent wasn't just anyone. He was connected. Not in some vague Hollywood movie way, but in the very real, very dangerous sense. His brother, his younger brother, ran an organization that touched everything from the docks to the political offices downtown. Money, influence, fear. It all flowed through channels that Vincent's brother controlled with an iron fist. But Vincent himself? He'd stepped away from that life years ago, right before he lost his sight in what the doctors called a tragic accident, but what everyone on the streets knew was a message. A brutal one. Since then he'd been living quietly, protected but isolated. His brother made sure he was safe, made sure he wanted for nothing. But safety and freedom aren't the same thing, and Vincent knew it. Coming to this coffee shop was one of the few things he insisted on. One of the few slices of normalcy he could still claim. His brother didn't like it, didn't trust it, but he allowed it because Vincent was family. And in their world, family meant everything. The girl didn't know any of this. She didn't know that every conversation she had with Vincent was being recorded. Didn't know that the bodyguard who brought him was analyzing her every move. Didn't know that somewhere in a luxury penthouse overlooking the city, her face was being studied, her background being investigated, her life being examined under a microscope. All she knew was that this kind old man seemed lonely, seemed like he needed a friend, and she had kindness to spare. Days turned into weeks. The routine solidified. She'd see him come in and her face would light up, not dramatically, just a subtle brightening that someone paying attention might catch. She'd have his usual ready before he even sat down. Black coffee, no sugar, always the perfect temperature. They started talking more. Vincent would tell fragmented stories from his past, carefully edited, of course. Never mentioning names, never revealing too much. Stories about business ventures that sounded legitimate but carried undertones of something darker. Stories about associates who moved on from their positions in ways that sounded permanent and ominous. She listened with genuine attention, like every word mattered. Sometimes she'd laugh at his dry humor. Sometimes she'd fall quiet when his stories took darker turns. "You remind me of someone," Vincent said one afternoon, his unseeing eyes pointed in her general direction. "Someone I knew a long time ago. Before everything got complicated." "Yeah," she said softly, wiping down the table next to his. "That a good thing?" "The best thing," he replied, his voice carrying weight that made her pause. She saw people. Really saw them. Not what they could do for her, not what they represented. Just saw them as human beings. "What happened to her?" the girl asked gently. Vincent's jaw tightened. "Life happened. My life happened. And sometimes the best people get caught in the worst storms." The girl didn't push. She never pushed. That was part of what made her different. But what she didn't see, what she couldn't possibly know, was that across the street in that idling SUV, the surveillance had intensified. Photos were being taken. Phone calls were being made. And in that penthouse downtown, a very dangerous man was starting to ask questions. Questions like, who is this girl? What does she want? And why the hell is she getting so close to my brother? As the days rolled on, that quiet routine became something solid, something real. She knew exactly how to help him without him having to ask anymore. Vincent, for his part, seemed to actually relax in that space, like it was the only place where he didn't have to keep his guard up against the world. They talked more now, though still in that careful way. He'd share pieces of his past, always fragmented, always full of long pauses where you could tell he was editing in real time, deciding what was safe to say and what needed to stay buried. She listened like it was the most important thing in the world. Not because she was nosy or trying to dig for information, she genuinely just cared. That kind of listening is rare, man. The kind where someone's fully present, not just waiting for their turn to talk. The contrast between them was wild. Here's this young woman, probably mid-20s, living a simple life, working a regular job, probably sharing an apartment with roommates somewhere in the valley. Normal struggles, normal dreams. And then there's Vincent, a man carrying decades of weight, of secrets, of choices that shaped lives and ended them. Two completely different worlds, somehow intersecting over coffee and conversation. What she still didn't notice, though, was the pattern developing around them. That black SUV across the street? It wasn't alone anymore. Sometimes it was a sedan. Sometimes a different SUV. The vehicles changed, but the presence remained constant. Eyes always watching. Always documenting. And inside that coffee shop, other things were shifting too. The manager, a middle-aged guy named Pete who usually kept to himself, started acting weird around her. He'd watch her interactions with Vincent, his expression tight, stressed. A couple times she caught him on the phone, speaking in hushed tones, his body language screaming anxiety. One morning, Pete pulled her aside before her shift. "Listen, He started, running his hand through his thinning hair. "That regular customer you've been helping. The older gentleman." "Mr. Vincent?" she said, her voice innocent, genuinely not understanding the tension. "Yeah, him." Pete glanced toward the window, then back at her. "Just, maybe keep things professional, yeah? Like cordial but distant. You feel me?" She frowned, confused. I'm just being nice to him. He seems lonely. I know. Just trust me on this one, okay? Some customers, they're better left to themselves. She wanted to argue, wanted to ask what the hell he was talking about, but Pete walked away before she could. The whole interaction left her feeling unsettled, like she'd stumbled into something she didn't understand. But she didn't change her behavior. She couldn't. It wasn't in her nature to be cold to someone who clearly valued the small kindnesses she offered. Meanwhile, across town in that penthouse, the questions were getting more intense. Vincent's brother, Marcus Romano, stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city he basically owned. At 53, Marcus was everything Vincent used to be before the accident, before the disillusionment. Sharp, ruthless, calculating. The kind of guy who could smile at you during dinner and have you disappeared before dessert if the situation called for it. He held a manila folder in his hand, flipping through photos and documents his people had compiled. Sarah Mitchell, he said aloud, reading from the file. 26 years old. Born in Sacramento, moved to LA 3 years ago. Works at the coffee shop, takes online classes at community college. No criminal record. No debt. No red flags whatsoever. His consigliere, a woman named Angela who'd been with the organization for 2 decades, stood nearby. She's clean, Marcus. Completely clean. We've dug into everything, her social media, her banking records, her relationships. She's exactly what she appears to be. Nobody's exactly what they appear to be, Marcus muttered, his eyes fixed on a photo of Sarah smiling at Vincent. Especially not people who get close to my family. Your brother seems happy, Angela offered carefully. For the first time in years, he actually seems happy. Marcus's jaw tightened. That was the problem, wasn't it? Vincent had been through hell, literally and figuratively. The accident that took his sight wasn't random. It was a message from a rival organization, a way of saying, we can touch you whenever we want. Marcus had responded to that message with the kind of violence that made people speak in whispers for months afterward. But Vincent? He'd never recovered, not really. He'd withdrawn from the family business, withdrawn from life itself. Became a ghost living in expensive apartments, protected but isolated. And now this girl, this nobody from nowhere, was somehow reaching him in a way that nothing and no one else had in years. It should have been a good thing. Marcus knew that intellectually. But in his world, good things came with hidden costs. They always did. I want eyes on her 24/7, Marcus said finally. Every conversation, every interaction, every person she talks to. I want to know everything. We're already doing that, Angela confirmed. And I want to meet her, Marcus added, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Soon. Back at the coffee shop, Sarah noticed Vincent seemed different that afternoon. More tense, more distracted. You okay? She asked gently, setting his coffee down in the usual spot. Vincent's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the cup. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you so kind to me? His voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. So why? Sarah paused, considering the question seriously. I guess. I don't know. My mom always taught me that everyone's fighting battles we can't see. And maybe all we can do is make someone's day a little easier, you know? Even if it's just in small ways. Vincent's expression shifted, something between gratitude and grief. Your mom sounds like she was a good person. Was, Sarah confirmed softly. She passed 2 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. She smiled sadly. But she taught me a lot before she left. Taught me that kindness doesn't cost anything, but it's worth everything. Vincent sat with that for a moment, his unseeing eyes glistening slightly. You have no idea how rare that is. Real kindness. No agenda, no angle. Just genuine human decency. It shouldn't be rare, Sarah said. It should be normal. In a better world maybe, Vincent replied. But not in mine. Sarah didn't understand what he meant by that. Didn't understand the weight behind those words. Didn't know that his world was a place where kindness was seen as weakness, where vulnerability got you killed, where every gesture had a calculated purpose. She was operating from a completely different rulebook, and that's what made her so dangerous. Not because she intended harm, but because she represented something Vincent's world had trained him to stop believing in. Hope. Redemption. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, people could still be good without wanting something in return. And for Marcus, watching all of this unfold through reports and surveillance footage, that made her the biggest threat of all. Because if Vincent started believing in hope again, started believing there was life beyond the organization, beyond the protection and the violence and the control, then Marcus might lose the one person in this world he actually gave a damn about. The one person who kept him tethered to something resembling humanity. The tension was building towards something inevitable. Everyone involved could feel it even if they didn't understand it yet. Sarah felt it in the changed atmosphere of the coffee shop, in Pete's nervous glances, in the way Vincent's bodyguard seemed more alert than usual. Vincent felt it in his gut, that old instinct that had kept him alive for decades telling him that something was coming. And Marcus felt it in the choice he was going to have to make soon, between protecting his brother and controlling him, between trust and suspicion, between letting Vincent have this small piece of happiness or shutting it down before it could become a liability. The next move was his. And everyone's life was about to change because of it. Hold up, before we get to what happens next, I need to know something from you. What would you do if you realized a simple gesture of yours could impact someone deeply, without you even knowing who they really are or what world they come from? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and stick around till the end, because how this story wraps up will completely change the way you see simple acts of kindness. The truth started coming out in pieces, like a puzzle nobody wanted to complete. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of gray, overcast day that makes LA feel almost melancholic. The marine layer had rolled in from the coast, and the coffee shop had that cozy, insulated feeling that made people linger longer than usual. Sarah was wiping down tables when three men walked in. They weren't like the usual customers. These guys moved differently, deliberate, aware, the kind of presence that makes a room feel smaller. They wore expensive suits that somehow looked casual, like they cost more than most people's monthly rent but were treated like everyday wear. The bodyguard who usually accompanied Vincent immediately stood up, his hand moving instinctively toward his waistband. The tension was instant, palpable. But the lead guy, tall salt and pepper hair, eyes that could cut through steel, raised his hand in a calming gesture. "Easy, Tony. We're just here to talk." Vincent's head turned toward the voice, and Sarah watched his entire body language shift. His shoulders tensed, his jaw clenched, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely afraid. "Marcus," Vincent said quietly, the name barely above a whisper. The name didn't mean anything to Sarah. Not yet. Marcus Romano crossed the coffee shop with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. He pulled out the chair across from Vincent and sat down without asking permission. His associates flanked the table, standing like sentinels. "We need to talk, Vincent," Marcus said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge that made Sarah's instincts scream danger. "Not here," Vincent replied urgently. "Please, not here." "It's fine," Marcus said dismissively. Then his eyes, sharp, analytical, missing nothing, turned to Sarah, who'd frozen mid-wipe, her cleaning rag still in hand. "You must be Sarah." Her heart dropped to her stomach. How did he know her name? Yes," she managed, her voice barely steady. Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "My brothers told me about you. Well, not directly. But I hear things. It's kind of my job to hear things." "Marcus, please," Vincent interjected, his voice strained. "She's got nothing to do with anything. She's just..." "Just what?" Marcus interrupted, still looking at Sarah. "Just a kind stranger who decided to take special interest in a blind old man? Just happened to dedicate so much time and attention to someone she barely knows." Sarah's confusion must have shown on her face because Marcus's expression shifted slightly, like he was recalibrating, reassessing. "You really don't know, do you?" Marcus said, almost to himself. "You genuinely have no idea who he is." "I know his name is Vincent," Sarah said, finding her voice despite the fear crawling up her spine. "I know he likes his coffee black, no sugar. I know he's kind and tells interesting stories and seems lonely. That's what I know." Marcus studied her for a long moment, the kind of scrutiny that felt invasive, like he was reading every secret she'd ever kept. Pete, the manager, had retreated to the back room, clearly wanting no part of whatever this was. The few other customers had quietly left, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "Vincent Romano," Marcus finally said, leaning back in his chair. "My older brother. The man you've been spending so much time with? He's not just some regular customer." "I know that," Sarah said, her defensive instincts kicking in. "I know he's been through a lot. I know he lost his sight in an accident." "It wasn't an accident," Marcus cut her off sharply. "It was a hit. A message. Someone wanted to send me a very clear signal about what they could do to the people I love." Sarah felt the room tilt slightly. What are you talking about?" Vincent's hand reached across the table blindly, and Sarah instinctively took it. His grip was tight, desperate. "I tried to keep you out of it," Vincent said to her, his voice thick with emotion. "That's why I never told you. Why I kept things vague. Because once you're connected to this world, you can't unknow it. You can't disconnect." Marcus watched their joined hands with an unreadable expression. "Do you know what I do, Sarah? Do you have any idea what the Romano name means in this city?" She shook her head slowly, though pieces were starting to click together in horrifying clarity. The surveillance, Pete's nervousness, the bodyguards, the way Vincent spoke about his past in those carefully edited fragments. "I run an organization," Marcus said bluntly. "We handle business that exists in the gray areas, and sometimes the very black areas, of legality. Money laundering, protection, imports and exports that don't go through traditional channels. My family has controlled significant portions of California's underground economy for 3 generations." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Vincent was part of it once," Marcus continued. "One of the best, actually. Until someone tried to kill him to get to me. They didn't succeed in killing him, obviously, but they took his sight. Sent him into the darkness permanently." Sarah felt like she was drowning in information she didn't ask for. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need you to understand what you've stumbled into," Marcus said, his tone shifting to something almost gentle, which was somehow more terrifying than his earlier coldness. "My brother is one of the few people in this world I actually give a damn about. He's protected, guarded, monitored. And when someone new enters his life, someone we don't know, someone we can't predict, that becomes a problem." "I'm not a problem," Sarah said, her voice firmer now despite the fear. "I'm just someone who saw a person who needed help and decided to help. That's it. No hidden agenda, no scheme, no angle. Just basic human decency." Marcus's associates exchanged glances, like the concept itself was foreign. "See, that's the thing," Marcus said, leaning forward. "In my world, basic human decency doesn't exist. Everything has a motive. Every kindness has a hook. Every gesture is calculated. So when I see someone like you, someone who appears to be genuinely, authentically kind without wanting anything in return, it doesn't compute. It makes me suspicious." "Then maybe your world is the problem," Sarah said before she could stop herself. The silence that followed was deafening. Vincent's grip on her hand tightened to the point of pain. Tony, the bodyguard, took a step forward, but Marcus held up his hand again. Then unexpectedly Marcus laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that seemed to surprise even him. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said, shaking his head. "Most people wouldn't dare talk to me like that." "I'm not most people," Sarah replied, her fear transforming into something else. Anger, maybe, or just exhaustion with the whole insane situation. "And I don't care who you are or what you do. Vincent is my friend. He comes into this coffee shop, I make his day a little better, and that's the whole story. If that makes me suspicious in your world, then honestly your world sounds pretty messed up." Vincent made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Sarah, please?" "No," she interrupted, surprising herself with her own boldness. "I'm tired of being treated like I'm some kind of threat because I was raised to be a decent person. Your brother is kind, he's intelligent, he's got amazing stories, and he deserves to have someone in his life who treats him like a human being instead of a liability or a victim or whatever else people see when they look at him." Marcus studied her for another long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his jacket pocket and both Vincent and Tony tensed immediately. But what he pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was a business card. He slid it across the table to Sarah. "That's my personal number," he said quietly. "Not many people have it. If anything, and I mean anything, happens that makes you uncomfortable, that makes you feel threatened, that seems off in any way, you call me immediately." "Understood." Sarah looked at the card like it might bite her. "Why?" "Because," Marcus said, standing up, "you made my brother smile. You made him look forward to something again. And despite what you might think of me, despite what I do, I love my brother more than anything else in this world. If you can give him moments of happiness in what's otherwise a pretty dark existence, then you're under my protection now. Whether you want it or not." He turned to Vincent. "We'll talk later. At home." Then to Sarah, "Take care of him." And just like that, Marcus Romano and his associates walked out of the coffee shop, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than their presence. Sarah slowly sank into the chair Marcus had vacated, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. Vincent's hand was still holding hers, trembling now. "I'm so sorry," Vincent whispered. "I never wanted you to get pulled into this. I should have stayed away. I should have." "Stop," Sarah said firmly. "Just stop. You didn't pull me into anything. I chose to be kind to you. That was my choice. And I'm not going to regret it just because your family is complicated. Complicated? Vincent repeated with a bitter laugh. That's one word for it. They sat in silence for a while, both processing what had just happened. The coffee shop felt different now, like a veil had been lifted and she could see all the things that had been there all along. The watching, the protecting, the danger that existed just beneath the surface of everyday life. What happens now? Sarah finally asked. Vincent sighed deeply. Now you have to decide if you want to keep coming to work, keep seeing me, keep being part of this. Because Marcus wasn't lying. Once you're connected to our world, it changes you. Follows you. You can't just walk away clean. Sarah thought about it. Thought about her simple life, her small apartment, her community college classes, and her dreams of maybe becoming a teacher someday. Thought about how easy it would be to quit this job, avoid this coffee shop, pretend this whole thing never happened. Then she thought about Vincent's smile when she described the sunset to him. The way he relaxed in her presence. The gratitude in his voice when she helped him navigate small tasks that the world made unnecessarily difficult for him. I'm not going anywhere, she said quietly but firmly. You're my friend. That doesn't change just because I know more about your family now. Vincent's unseeing eyes filled with tears. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most naive. Maybe both, Sarah said with a small smile. Guess we'll find out. What neither of them knew was that across the street, in that ever-present SUV, the conversation had been recorded. Every word documented. And in his penthouse, Marcus would listen to it later that night, alone with his thoughts and his whiskey. And for the first time in years he'd wonder if maybe, just maybe, there were still good people left in the world. People who could teach him something he'd forgotten a long time ago. The weeks that followed were different, but not in the way Sarah expected. She thought maybe the coffee shop visits would stop. That Vincent would disappear, protected away from the complications she now represented. Or that Marcus would change his mind, decide she was too much of a wild card, too unpredictable for their carefully controlled world. But neither of those things happened. Instead, something else unfolded. Something nobody could have predicted. Vincent kept coming to the coffee shop, but now there was an openness between them that hadn't existed before. No more carefully edited stories. No more vague references to a past he couldn't fully share. He told her the truth, about growing up in the organization, about the violence he'd witnessed and participated in, about the moment he decided he wanted out and the price he paid for that decision. I thought losing my sight was the worst thing that could happen to me, Vincent told her one afternoon, his coffee growing cold between his hands. But the real darkness? It wasn't the lack of vision. It was losing faith in people. In goodness. In the possibility that someone could just care without an agenda. And now? Sarah asked softly. Now I'm starting to remember what light feels like, he said, and the weight of those words settled between them like something sacred. But the real shift happened with Marcus. 2 weeks after that confrontation in the coffee shop, Sarah received a text from the number on the business card she'd almost thrown away. It was brief, direct. Dinner? Saturday. 7 p.m. Address attached. Come alone. She'd stared at that message for a solid 10 minutes, her thumb hovering over the delete button. Every survival instinct screamed that this was a bad idea. You don't have dinner with people like Marcus Romano. You don't walk voluntarily into the lion's den. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, something about wanting to understand the man behind the reputation, made her go. The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't have prices on the menu. Understated elegance, the type where the staff knew your name before you arrived and every detail was orchestrated with precision. Marcus was already there, sitting at a private table in the back, away from other diners. You came, he said when she approached, and there was genuine surprise in his voice. You invited, she replied, taking the seat across from him. For a moment they just looked at each other. Two people from completely different worlds trying to find common ground. I'm not going to lie to you, Marcus started, his usual commanding presence somehow softer in this setting. I had you investigated. Background check, financial records, social media, past relationships. Everything. I needed to know if you were a threat. Sarah's jaw tightened. And I found exactly what Vincent told me I'd find. Nothing. No red flags, no hidden motives, no connections to rivals or law enforcement. Just a regular person living a regular life trying to do good in small ways. That disappoints you? Sarah asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. No, Marcus said, and the honesty in his tone surprised her. It terrifies me. He poured them both wine, expensive, probably older than she was, and continued. My whole life, I've operated on the assumption that everyone wants something. Everyone has an angle. That's how I've stayed alive, stayed in power. I trust suspicion more than I trust anything else. He paused, swirling the wine in his glass. But you? You genuinely don't want anything from us. You saw my brother, a blind man sitting alone, and you just helped. No calculation, no scheme. Just pure, uncomplicated kindness. That shouldn't be terrifying, Sarah said. That should be normal. In your world, maybe. In mine. Marcus shook his head. Kindness like that is dangerous. Because it makes people vulnerable. Makes them hope. And hope is the most dangerous thing you can give someone who's spent years learning to live without it. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes meeting his directly. Is that what scares you? That your brother might start hoping again? That he might remember there's more to life than just surviving? Marcus's expression cracked, just for a second. A glimpse of something raw beneath the polished exterior. Every single day since Vincent lost his sight, I've lived with the guilt that it should have been me. That hit was meant for me. He paid the price for my choices, my enemies, my life. And the only way I've been able to live with that is by keeping him safe. Protected. Controlled. Controlled, Sarah repeated. You mean isolated? Same thing in my world. No, Sarah said firmly. It's really not. Safety isn't the same as living. Protection isn't the same as happiness. You've kept him alive, but have you let him actually live? The silence that followed was heavy with truths neither of them wanted to fully acknowledge. Finally, Marcus spoke again, his voice quieter than before. He talks about you. Did you know that? When I visit him at his apartment, you're the first thing he mentions. What you said, what you talked about, how you described something he couldn't see. You've given him something I couldn't, a reason to engage with the world again. Then why does that feel like a problem to you? Sarah asked. Because, Marcus said, and for the first time she heard something like vulnerability in his voice, what happens when you decide this is too much? When the reality of what we are, what we do, becomes too heavy. When you wake up one day and realize you don't want to be connected to people like us anymore. Vincent will survive losing his sight. I don't know if he'll survive losing hope again. Sarah sat with that, understanding finally clicking into place. This wasn't about control or suspicion. This was about a brother who loved his sibling so much that the thought of him being hurt again, emotionally this time, was unbearable. I can't promise I'll never leave, Sarah said honestly. Life happens, circumstances change. But I can promise that if I do, it won't be because of who you are or what you do. It'll be for reasons that have nothing to do with Vincent himself. And I can promise that right now, in this moment, I care about your brother. Not because of what he can do for me, but because he's a good person who deserves good things. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then did something completely unexpected. He smiled, a real smile, not the calculated ones he wore like armor. You know what the crazy thing is? He said. I actually believe you. That dinner changed something fundamental. Marcus didn't become a different person overnight, he was still who he was, did what he did. But he stopped seeing Sarah as a threat and started seeing her as, well, as someone who was good for Vincent. And in his world, that mattered more than anything else. The coffee shop visits continued. Vincent seemed lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. He laughed more, opened up more, allowed himself to just exist without the constant shadow of guilt and isolation. And Sarah? She kept showing up. Kept being kind. Kept proving that sometimes, the simplest gestures carry the most profound impact. One afternoon, about 3 months after that first confrontation, Marcus showed up at the coffee shop alone. No associates, no bodyguards. Just him. He ordered a coffee, black like his brother, and approached Vincent's usual table where Sarah and Vincent were mid-conversation. Mind if I join? Marcus asked. Vincent's head turned toward his brother's voice, surprise evident on his face. Marcus. Yeah, it's me. Marcus sat down, looking between them. I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. This place. This routine. Sarah could have made it awkward, could have brought up their complicated history. Instead she just smiled. I'll get you a refill. Be right back. As she walked away, she heard Marcus say to Vincent, You were right about her. Told you, Vincent replied, and there was satisfaction in his voice. She's good for you. Hell, she might be good for both of us. What nobody in that coffee shop understood, what maybe they'd never fully understand, was that Sarah Mitchell hadn't just helped a blind man navigate his daily coffee routine. She'd done something far more profound. She'd reminded two brothers who'd spent years drowning in darkness that light still existed. that kindness wasn't extinct. That maybe, just maybe, there were still people in the world worth believing in. The organization didn't change. Marcus still ran his empire, still made hard choices, still operated in those gray and black areas of morality. But now, once a week, he'd show up at that coffee shop. He'd sit with his brother. And sometimes he'd talk to Sarah, not as a threat to be managed, but as a person who'd taught him something valuable. That power and control weren't the only things worth protecting. That sometimes, the strongest thing you could do was let go just enough to let someone you love actually live. Vincent never got his sight back. But in a way he could see more clearly than he had in years. He could see that the world wasn't all darkness and danger. That there were still people like Sarah. People who chose kindness even when it cost them something, even when it was scary, even when it didn't make logical sense. And that truth? That changed everything. This story isn't just about a mob boss and a coffee shop girl. It's about what happens when two worlds collide. When power meets innocence, when suspicion meets trust, when isolation meets connection. It's about the kind of courage it takes to be genuinely kind in a world that's taught people to be cynical. And it's about how one simple gesture, repeated day after day, can crack open even the most hardened hearts. Now click on the next video. It's just as powerful as this one, and it'll hit you right in the feels. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. See you there.